O Lord, grant us a daily awareness of the precious gift of life which you have given us. As members of this legislative assembly, we dedicate our lives anew to the service of our province and our country. Amen.
Yes, I do. Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to present to this Assembly a petition signed by over 8,300 Albertans requesting, among other things, that Alberta be declared a nuclear weapons-free zone.
Member for Edmonton Gold-Bar.
Mr. Speaker, may I respectfully request the petition I presented yesterday now be read and received by this Assembly?
Read.
Just read it. To the Honourable Legislative Assembly of Alberta in Legislature assembled. Wherefore your petitioners humbly pray that your Honourable Assembly may be pleased to establish a committee to investigate and report on guidelines for defining what would constitute government regulatory negligence with respect to the failures of First Investors and Associated Investors of Canada, and, should negligence be found, resolve how Alberta investors in these two companies should be compensated for this negligence. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions.
Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I request the unanimous consent of this Assembly that through you this Assembly convey to the Edmonton Eskimos its very good wishes for success of the Eskimos in their contest this weekend for the Grey Cup.
The Chair takes it that the response indicates unanimous consent, but the Chair also questions whether the Deputy Premier this year would like to make some statement about another team, or no, I assume it's not. Let the record show the motion passes unanimously.
Introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 245, the Class Action Act. This bill would provide for the right of class actions to be brought on behalf of groups of individuals with similar claims, and would, in particular, facilitate the consolidation of actions in respect of the principal group affair.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Buffalo has asked leave for first reading to introduce Bill number 245, Class Action Act. Those willing to give assent to first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. So ordered.
Bill 245, Class Action Act, introduced by the Honourable Member Mr. Schumer, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
Speaker, I take leave to table the opposition's green paper on the financial industry in Alberta, which we released on October the 22nd or 26, 1987, on which we held public hearings on the financial industry across the province.
Chair recognizes Minister of Advanced Education.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table several annual reports required by statute. Annual reports of Mount Royal College, the Alberta College of Art, Lethbridge Community College, Olds College, Lakeland College, and Fairview College.
Minister of Economic Development and Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table the annual report of the Alberta Opportunity Company. As well, Mr. Speaker, I wish to table responses to two motions for return, motions 208 and 212, as ordered by the Assembly.
Solicitor General.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table the 24th annual report of the Racing Commission.
Honourable members, pursuant to the Legislative Assembly Act, I am tabling Member Services Orders 7, 8, and 9, 1987.
Introduction of special guests.
Speaker, it's a pleasure for me to introduce four people who are seated in your gallery today. These are visitors from Japan. And first, I'd like to ask them to rise individually as I introduce them. First, I'd like to introduce Mr. Shoji Ushiki. Mr. Ushiki is with, and all four gentlemen are with Nisho Iwai, one of the key trading companies from Japan, and they're visiting Alberta as part of a cross-Canada mission, and also in response to the recent Alberta mission to Japan. Mr. Ushiki, in addition to heading the delegation, is chairman of the Japan-Canada Special Business Council, and chairs the group on agricultural and forestry matters. So it's great to have him with us. With Mr. Ushiki is Mr. Iji Fujita, also Mr. Iwa Okamoto, and Mr. Masai Yamashita. I'd like the gallery, or the members of the Assembly, to welcome our guests to Alberta.
Member for Edmonton Millwoods.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce to you today and to the members of the Assembly a delegation of about a dozen members from the Millwoods Injured Workers Committee. They're here this afternoon looking forward to meeting with the minister responsible for the WCB after question period today to discuss their concerns. I'd like to ask them to stand now and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Member for Edmonton Glengarry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce to you and through you to members of the Assembly 44 students from Lorelei Elementary School in Glengarry. They are accompanied by their teachers, Mrs. Rimney, Mrs. Dane, and Mr. Luard. I'd ask them to rise in the gallery and receive the very warm welcome of the Assembly.
Edmonton Belmont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you and all members of the Assembly 22 students from the Londonderry Junior High School from the constituency of Edmonton Belmont. Mr. Speaker, by way of introduction, if I may, I'd like to advise you that earlier this month, this school had the Chief Electoral Officer for Canada visit their school, and they held a mock election. And I think that all of us will be pleased to know that due to lack of political affiliation, none of us won, but that a Canadian rock star, Luba Kowalchuk, is now the Prime Minister or the Premier or the Mayor of the City of Edmonton. I'm not sure which. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, they're accompanied by their teacher, Mrs. Wolanski. They're seated in the public gallery. I'd ask that they rise and receive the welcome of the Assembly.
I'd like to introduce to you and through you to the members of the Assembly a school group from my constituency. There's 60 grade 6 students accompanied by their teachers Cease Race and Rod Howard. They are seated in the members gallery. I would ask that they rise and if you could give them a warm welcome. Thank you.
Edmonton Gold Bar.
Mr. Speaker, I'm privileged again today to introduce to you and through you to members of the Assembly another group of principal investors. They're seated in the members' gallery, and I hope the House will accord them a warm welcome.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the first question to the Premier. Mr. Speaker, the Premier indicated yesterday that the Mulroney trade agreement would have absolutely no effect on an Alberta government ability to control supply and pricing of our energy resources. Mr. Speaker, the Premier is aware that this is a rather novel interpretation, disagreed with by Mr. Lougheed, Mr. Mass, and many constitutional lawyers in the country. But my question is, in view of the fact that the Premier has this interpretation, would he indicate to this Assembly where he has received his information? Is the source of his information Brian Mulroney?
Mr. Speaker, of course, the government, in the course of some 18 months, and myself as Premier, chairing the Premiers throughout these free trade meetings, obviously a great deal of information which we obtained through our legal experts, our constitutional experts, and I want to absolutely make it clear that there is no way that Alberta's ownership, management, or control of its resources is impacted by that trade agreement.
The backbenchers are pounding as if they knew what we were talking about. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, part of the problem that we're having is that the Premier keeps talking about the Constitution, and I am asking specifically about the Mulroney trade agreement. Now, Mr. Speaker, will the Premier at least confirm that it will be impossible under this agreement for Alberta to receive higher prices in the U.S. market without raising the prices to our own citizens?
No, that is not correct, Mr. Speaker. He is wrong.
Mr. Speaker, again, the Premier is the last one in Canada to believe this, but let me ask this question then to follow up then, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the Mulroney trade agreement, it says clearly that the United States will have non-discriminatory access to Alberta's energy resources. Non-discriminatory access. Now, Mr. Speaker, how could the Premier explain this? How it is possible to set lower prices for Albertans? Would you not, in fact, be discriminating against the United States?
Right. No, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, when we're sold out down the way because of this government, we can't do the things we want. It won't be so funny then.
That's right. He won't be Premier, though. See?
Mr. Speaker, well, let's look at our own act, the Gases Preservation Act, Mr. Speaker, and again, using the non-discriminatory clause. Would the Premier indicate how he will provide the type of access to the United States market under Section 9 of the Gases Preservation Act, which allows the government, this government, to divert export gas when it is required in Alberta? How is he going to do that under the Mulroney trade agreement?
Mr. Speaker, I will say again, Alberta's ownership, management, and control of its resources is not impacted by the trade agreement. If the honourable member would just stretch his mind a little bit, he would know that if we are selling at market prices in North America and somebody wants to pay more to us for some of it, that's perfectly going to be allowed, Mr. Speaker. Without any... Now,
please, there's a certain level of repartee involved, but shouting down is a little bit different. Honourable Premier, please continue, then
Mr. Speaker, sit here quietly and listen to their comments, and then when they don't like the answer, they can't stand it. Now, Mr. Speaker, it's also clear that the Alberta government can provide, under its natural gas rebate plan, lower natural gas prices to consumers in Canada, in Alberta. And we have been able to do it in the past. We're able to do it now. I only ask the honourable member to not spend so much time trying to destroy something that's an incredible opportunity for the people of Alberta.
Leader of the Representative.
Supplementary question to the Premier, and I ask the question in light of comments reported by the Minister of Energy in this area. The Free Trade Pact specifies in one of the sections that both sides have agreed to prohibit restrictions on imports or exports, including quantitative restrictions, taxes, minimum import or export price requirements, or any other equivalent measure. My question to the Premier, and this relates to a comment of the Minister of Energy, does the government intend to drop its plans to substitute a percentage royalty on natural gas sales with a floor price on natural gas sales when the gas prices fall below a specified amount?
Mr. Speaker, I didn't get the full import of the question, the final part of it. Would you repeat it?
Mr. Speaker, in terms of an explanation to the Premier, the question is the control of the price of natural gas in the province. The Minister has indicated that there may be a floor price implemented, and in terms of the free trade agreement or terms at this point, that would not be allowed.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, we are not working on a floor price for natural gas. But as I already said, that we can certainly provide under our natural gas rebate plan to the consumers in Alberta lower prices for natural gas.
Leader of the Liberal Caucus.
Mr. Speaker, this is to the Premier. He says he does not catch the import of the question. I don't think he catches the import of the whole policy of Continental Energy. Would the Premier go out on the limb and guarantee that he will not remove the royalty rebate for farm fuels next year? Will he guarantee that the royalty rebate for farm fuels will not be removed in order that he can fulfill this part of the Continental Energy policy?
Mr. Speaker, first I should welcome the honourable member to the House this year. And also, Mr. Speaker, thank him, Mr. Speaker, for his contribution in Chinook yesterday. I see why both he and the Leader of the Opposition are dressed in black today. Well, it should be black if it isn't, Mr. Speaker. Actually, Mr. Speaker, we do not have a royalty rebate program. We have a program to assist our farmers and ranchers with fuel costs.
Chair recognizes the Leader of the Opposition. Second main question. Pardon me, the member for Red Deer South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Premier. Premier, can you advise the Assembly, is it true that the real concerns coming from the energy issue in this agreement are coming from people like Broadbent in central Canada who are concerned that they're not going to be able to control our energy anymore?
And there's no question, Mr. Speaker, when you strip away all the rhetoric that we are hearing from a lot of people in Canada, the one thing that becomes clear is that both the Liberal and NDP parties, who are interventionist in a philosophical way, can't stand the thought that they wouldn't be able to impose another NEP program. And that drives them crazy.
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my second question also to Brian Mulroney's fool. Mr. Speaker.
Parliamentary language, careful.
Mr. Speaker, my second question, Mr. Speaker, and we appreciate the fact that we can ask some questions about the principal affair, and maybe we'll be lucky enough to get some answers today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is dealing with the potential compensation. The Premier said that there would be compensation for the investors. He said that publicly, Mr. Speaker. Now there's a great deal of confusion about what he said, and the confusion has been created by this Premier. Would the Premier indicate if the Premier is saying that regulatory negligence on the part of the government would be sufficient grounds for this government to reimburse the investors?
Mr. Speaker, I dealt with that question yesterday.
Mr. Speaker, again, Again, he's showing by not wanting to answer precisely what's going, Mr. Speaker. Let us put it down then, Mr. Speaker. Let us ask this question. He said that if there is negligence by the government, then that they will compensate the investors. My question is, who will determine this negligence, Mr. Speaker? Will it be this government behind closed doors in a very secretive way, behind closed doors? Is that who will decide whether there is negligence?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Well, then, my question is to the Premier. Who is going to decide if there is negligence on part of the government? Could the Premier tell this Assembly and the people of Alberta who's going to decide this?
Mr. Speaker, there are currently in place a series of ways in which it may be established, and the government of Alberta will make sure that if there is negligence laid at our door and causing damage to those investors, we will make up that damage.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's not good enough. Let me ask the question. No, we want to know what the negligence is. Mr. Speaker, the people of Alberta want to know what constitutes negligence, and all we're getting is gabblegoop from this Premier. Now, my question to the Premier is strictly this, Mr. Speaker. The government was clearly aware that the regulations were not being followed. Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. That gets us into pretty close to being completely out of order, because we're now getting into the matter that the inquiries are touching upon.
Mr. Speaker, the question is to the Premier. If the government was not, when the government is proved to be not following their regulations, is this grounds for negligence, and will there be compensation to the investors, Mr. Speaker?
That's right. There's a difficulty there that when the Honourable Leader of the Opposition changed his words to when they are found from if they are found. Therefore, we go on to any supplementary on this matter. That's your floor.
On how you're ruling that order under Section 13.2. Speaker, I have to follow the standing orders of this House. I demand that. That's. Yeah.
It's with regard to 23 subsection A and 1, and I'm sorry, the interpretation stands. You asked for the notation. That's what it is. Leader of the Liberal Caucus.
Mr. Speaker, I think my question supplementary is to the Premier. It's very simple, straightforward. He has used the words, Mr. Speaker, proven negligence. Could the Premier just tell in his own words what he considers proven negligence of the government?
Mr. Speaker, those words stand on their own. You understand English, don't you?
The difficulty is a legal interpretation. Further supplementaries on this question? Supplementaries on this question? Chair recognizes the Leader of the Liberal Caucus. Main question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having come back from refreshed for such a huge increase in the vote in the South there, I'm ready to take on the Premier and all the lackeys he has chained up behind him there, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on August the 20th, the Premier stated that should the government be proven negligent, as he says plain English, and is ordered to repay investors. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, in my excitement at the morning, I let off with the question that's already covered by the Leader of the Opposition. Instead of, if you'll allow me to retreat, and I'll go after the real culprit here. The Premier has goosed the investors that's been in the Associated and First for a while, but I want to go after the Treasurer, who took a double whammy. Now, could the Treasurer confirm that 2 months after his decision to dissolve the First and Associated, the principal mutual funds were sold for a net value of $15 million?
Point of order being raised, but I
does not use the investors of anybody. And that should be withdrawn, Mr. Speaker.
All right. The Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, goose is all right.
say the first response that comes to my mind on that issue. The chair recognizes the Premier on a point of order at the end of question period. Member for Westlock Sturgeon, please continue briefly.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, now that we know what the Premier's done to the investors, now could we go on to is whether the Treasurer would confirm that 2 months...
Honourable member, please just get on with the question.
Would the Treasurer then confirm that 2 months after the decision to dissolve First and Associated, the principal group mutual funds were sold for a net value of about $15 million? That's an easy one.
Honourable member, it is likely that the question is entirely out of order. Nevertheless, I think that in view of the direction given to the House yesterday, that the chair will reserve judgment on the admissibility of that question and will take it in written form and report back to the House accordingly, hopefully tomorrow at the earliest, if possible.
Mr. Speaker, it was a matter of record. I was just trying to lull the Treasurer into a sense of false security there. But could the Treasurer then please confirm that the same mutual funds were valued at between $120 and $140 million over a year ago by Wood Gundy in a prospectus approved by the Alberta Securities Department?
Sorry, honourable member. Same thing, written form, please.
Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt you would do a better job as provincial treasurer, but I'm after the treasurer, Mr.
Honourable member, you're called to order. One is not supposed to be challenging the chair and making comments such as that. Please continue with your supplementary.
All right, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad you're going to let me at him again. Could the minister please confirm that the value of these mutual funds were eroded dramatically by the virtue of the loss of confidence in the principal group because of the failure of First and Associate investors? Could he confirm that?
Thank you, honourable member. You and I are going to have a lot of correspondence. The same thing applies to this question.
I don't know which of us is going to be in the best shape jumping up and down here, but... Could the Treasurer explain to the House, in light of the fact that he destroyed a great deal of the value of the investments, why he did not utilize a procedure that's often used in the United States and has been used in Ontario, where the government moved in and managed the financial and the corporation and sustaining its value or maintaining a great deal of its value to get a lot more back for the investors? Why did he not do that simple procedure?
Same difficulty. Thank you. Honourable member for Westlock Sturgeon, the chair is very much aware that you were unable to be in the chamber yesterday, but hopefully you would be able to read through the exciting version of Hansard that was generated yesterday, and perhaps look at some of the fine print there in the discussions with all of the various issues that were dealt with. And this is the procedure that the House is going to have to deal with on some of the topics, so that I look forward to your 4 questions in written form, hopefully before the end of the afternoon.
Very carefully. I checked it out with the judge, and it sounded my questions were okay.
Thank you, honourable member, but I'm afraid it's the opinion of the chair that has to try to deal with that as the last authority. Chair recognizes the Leader of the Representative Caucus. Next main question.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Advanced Education, and it comes from calls from the University of Calgary in terms of the admission policy of students to that faculty. And I was wondering if the Minister could clarify why the University of Calgary has an open quota system of accepting students from out of province at the present time, to the neglect of some of the Alberta students that would like to enter the Faculty of Medicine.
Mr. Speaker, I'm unable to answer that question in detail today. I'll attempt to get more details, but I can say this, that most of the faculties at the universities of Calgary and Alberta do have quotas. The general admission has been into the faculties of arts and science. With respect to the percentage of foreign students which are admitted, the Board of Governors, and I believe the student bodies as well, support the idea of the benefits that accrue from the exchanges that are gained by having foreign students on campus, and over the past few years have generally kept foreign enrollment at 5% or less.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question, and my question relates to students from other provinces of Canada. As of 1986, 1987, 22 out of 72 seats at the Faculty of Medicine are occupied by students from outside of the province of Alberta, from other provinces of Canada. 1986 it was 13, and 1985 it's 12. In 1988, which the faculty is now taking enrollment, taking applications, the feeling is that the percentage may even be greater. To my question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, could the Minister give an indication as to the reason why fewer Alberta students are being accepted in that faculty when we have such a large number of graduates from our high schools?
No, I can't, Mr. Speaker. The universities are autonomous and self-governing, as the honourable member is aware, but it does work both ways. It would be interesting to compare those figures with enrollments in other provincial universities of Alberta residents.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Minister. Other universities in Canada outside of Alberta accept a fixed percentage of students, and my information is up to 2 students from Alberta in other medical faculties across Canada. They have a fixed limit. Has the Minister had any discussions with the other provinces of Canada in terms of a reciprocal agreement, that if there's fixed percentages in other provinces, why not in Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, the only place I'm aware there's a fixed quota in other provinces is in a situation like the School of Veterinary Medicine in Saskatoon that is supported by the 4 Western provinces, and in return for its financial support, the province of Alberta is entitled to so many student spaces. I have never heard before of the issue that is raised by the honourable member today.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary. Would the Minister take it upon himself to review the matter with the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Calgary, the executive personnel, and report back to the legislature?
Well, I'll be glad to do that. If the honourable member's office staff is unable to do it, we'll phone the same people and find out the answer.
Edmonton Millwoods.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Advanced Education, speaking about the concerns at the University of Calgary, can the Minister give us some explanation to the students at the U of C who are so concerned about cutbacks there that they've gone on a hunger strike? What does he have to say to those people?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I suppose I could respond with statistics and show them what Alberta's support per student is, and on a per capita basis is. Compared with other provinces, it is the highest. I could compare the tuition fees that they're paying, which is the second lowest next to the province of Quebec. I suppose those things perhaps might not impress some people, but in my view, they're important. I've discussed with the president of the Students' Union the matter of the hunger strike. It's a way the students have of bringing public attention at the student level, particularly to the effect and concern they have about cutbacks, in which we share.
Calgary Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Some of the quota problems at the University of Calgary, which are being discussed, arise as a result of financial problems, and I'm wondering whether the Minister could confirm that the study which he has set in motion with respect to the disparity of funding between universities in Alberta has found that the University of Calgary, in fact, is suffering from a $17 million shortfall on a per capita basis in relation to the Edmonton institution.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is referring to what we have called the Dupre study, and I expect that will be made public during the first week of December.
Member for Calgary McCall, followed by the member for Edmonton Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to address a question to the Minister of Hospitals. Earlier this year, the Peter Lougheed Hospital was turned over to the General Hospital to manage, creating a one-hospital, two-site situation. It was indicated that this hospital would be available to open in April of 1988, creating great expectations in northeast Calgary and some of the surrounding communities. Would the minister indicate to the many expectant citizens the reasons for the additional suggested delay, and is there any way the minister or his department can determine the validity of this delay?
Mr. Speaker, the reasons for the delay, which is expected to be perhaps 3 or 4 months, is entirely with respect to the provision of certain types and kinds of equipment in the hospital and the construction progress. It's not in any way an unusual delay for a project of this particular size and magnitude, and particularly with regard to the need for the hospital to be compatible in terms of its computer systems and so on with the Calgary General. So it's not something that anyone could have done anything about. Certainly all the funding is in place, and the hospital will open as soon as it's humanly possible for those who are involved to get it completed.
Supplementary to the Minister, Mr. Speaker, and he has partially answered the question that I wish to ask as a supplementary, and I want a reassurance of, are the provincial monies in place to ensure the opening of this hospital if the General Hospital was or is able to do so at the April 1st prediction?
Well, Mr. Speaker, our government has made a commitment to the opening of the Peter Lougheed Hospital, and of course the operating costs for the next fiscal year are a matter that will be dealt with when the provincial treasurer tables his budget sometime in 1988.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, when will the Minister see that the General Board is made up of the provincial and city appointees rather than the present system of city appointees only to ensure dialogue between the Minister and the Board is of the highest accord?
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, I should say at the outset that no one should make any suggestions that the dialogue between my office and the chairman and board of the Calgary General Hospital at the present time is not of the highest accord. We have had extremely good cooperation from that board throughout the entire operation of moving the responsibility for the Lougheed Hospital from Calgary District Hospital Group to the Calgary General Board, and all of us should be very appreciative of the excellent way in which that board has cooperated. On the second question of when there will be some changes with respect to the manner in which the board is made up, that is a matter that's been discussed between myself and the mayor of the city of Calgary, Mayor Klein, and the chairman of the hospital board, Mr. Halpin, and they have agreed that we should bring forward legislation, hopefully in the spring session of the legislature, which would amend the Calgary General Hospital District Act and provide for some form of joint appointments by the provincial government and by the city of Calgary to the board, and provide for joint ownership of the Peter Lougheed Hospital and the Calgary General Hospital. Exactly how that will occur has not yet been decided, but meetings will be held over the course of the next few months to determine the nature of the changes that are required.
Order, please. Thank you. Hopefully there's something left for a final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, just one final supplementary. Will the Minister give assurances that his department will be discussing with the General Board on a continuing basis to ensure the people of the northeast area of the city of Calgary and the catchment area of this hospital will have this hospital open at the earliest possible time so as to ensure their health needs?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that has always been the objective, and the project manager, Mr. Cy Simonson, is working very, very closely with the Calgary General Board in order to have the hospital open as soon as possible, and my review of the situation is that the cooperation on all parts is excellent, and I have no reason to doubt that it won't continue that way.
Member for Edmonton Millwoods.
Mr. Speaker, given that the Grey Nuns Hospital and the Peter Lougheed went together and were basically a joint project, can the minister today stand in his place and guarantee to the people of southeast Edmonton that the Grey Nuns Hospital will not be delayed any further beyond its original delayed opening of April 1st, 88?
It would be inappropriate, I think, Mr. Speaker, for me to stand in my place and make guarantees about an opening date. I can say that the Edmonton General Hospital Board, the board and the Grey Nuns have been very effective in altering their programs after decisions were made to alter the Edmonton General Hospital, provide extended care beds there, and have worked very hard to bring the Millwoods Hospital on stream in April of 1988. The present plans are to provide for an official opening of the facility, which would be after it comes into operation in May of 1988, and I have no reason to doubt that the board will be able to meet that target.
Calgary-Buffalo supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's becoming quite clear that the structure of hospital management in Calgary has become an inefficient mess, with the Calgary board having 3, the Foothills Hospital standing alone, and the General with 2 hospitals. In light of the fact that consideration is being given to a review in the structure of the General Hospital Board, could the minister advise whether there is any thought with respect to making an overall review of the manner in which our board structure operates, so that we can operate in the most efficient manner possible?
Well, I object very strongly, Mr. Speaker, to the honourable member's suggestions that there's something wrong with the nature in which Calgary hospital boards have been operating. We have never had such good cooperation from hospital boards as we've had from the Foothills Hospital Board, the Crown Hospital Board in Calgary, from the Calgary District Hospital Group, and the Calgary General Hospital, and the Provincial Children's Hospital in Calgary, in terms of rationalizing programs and saving funds by avoiding duplication and operating hospitals on the basis of fewer programs in each hospital. So I'll conclude, Mr. Speaker, by saying this. If the honourable member has some reason to believe that there are hospital boards in Calgary, including the Calgary District Hospital Group or the Calgary General, that aren't doing their level best and doing very good in providing hospital services, let him provide some examples and let him provide some names of the people he'd like replaced.
The member for Edmonton Kingsway, followed by the member for Edmonton Meadowlark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are to the Premier, and I'll ask him to guess what topic. The lifting of the licenses of First Investors Corporation and Associated Investors Corporation on June 30th by the Treasurer of this province left the savings of some 30,000 Albertans in jeopardy. Many of these people were elderly and had deposited that money to ease their impending retirement. Is the Premier comfortable with the fact that these people have so far received only 30% of their money back and will have to wait several years before they get another 30 to 35% back?
Obviously, Mr. Speaker, nobody wanted to see those investors hurt.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Sympathy is cheap, however, and it's best when backed up by some action.
Here, here. Here, here.
So,
here, here. That's all they're getting is time. Sympathy.
Will the Premier authorize the Treasury branches to advance to those those contract holders a further 35% of their money through the Treasury branch system in return for the right of the government to collect that money back from the liquidation process? And will he do it before Christmas?
Here. Mr. Speaker, that was dealt with yesterday by the Honourable Provincial Treasurer.
Yeah. No, Mr. Speaker, it was not dealt with by anybody yesterday. The Speaker refused to answer it. And some of the contract holders think it's a great idea. I have a letter here from one. The supplementary question is, Mr. Premier, do you think that one of the sort of brush-offs I got yesterday was that the process is already in place? And that, I guess my question is, do you think that Coopers and Lybrand or the courts or the investors would object to the government sidestepping that process and reimbursing them now?
With due respect, Honourable Member, and Beauchesne, it's not a matter of asking opinions of gentlemen. Please, in the next supplementary you would like to craft.
It would be really difficult if the Premier had to give an opinion, wouldn't it?
Order, please. We're early in session, and there's been a fair amount of wide scope with respect to the matter of supplementaries. Let's keep supplementaries the way they're supposed to be. They're questions, not repartee, back and forth, but questions.
Mr. Premier, this government of yours rescued the depositors of Northwest Trust, the depositors of Heritage Trust, the Edmonton Savings Credit Union, I'm getting to the question, and participated in an attempted bailout of CCB. Why are you playing Scrooge with the innocent victims of your own government's negligence?
Mr. Speaker, obviously the government did not do the things that he led up to in his in preamble to his question. But let's be clear about one thing. This group over here, or that group there, haven't done one thing to help those investors but talk hot air. There's one group in this legislature who has helped those investors, and it's the government who's helped them by millions and millions and millions of dollars. And it's been a careful, considerate, understanding assistance for those investors. And it certainly hasn't been that much.
The member makes another statement. The member will be very disappointed at perhaps being suspended from the service of the House. The chair recognizes the member for Little Bow. Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the provincial treasurer, in light of the original question that was just asked, could the provincial treasurer confirm that the government will not intervene in the practices of the Treasury branch in this province? And if that answer cannot be confirmed as yes, then I'd like to advise my constituents to withdraw their savings.
I'm not too sure what the question is.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps the gentleman would just give the question again so I understood it fully.
Mr. Speaker, my question, without the added phrase, to the provincial treasurer. Could the provincial treasurer confirm at this time as the policy of government not to intervene in terms of the practices of the Treasury branch, in terms of loans that they may provide for various citizens for various reasons in the province of Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, that is the policy of the government.
Supplementary, Westlock Sturgeon.
I'm very pleased to see that the treasurer was glued to his seat, has at least got up and said he's going to keep his fingers out of some more financial affairs. But back to the supplementary to the Premier, would he not agree that in the spirit of any sort of compassion or human justice, that he will make available interest-free loans backed by the government, doesn't have to be from the Treasury branch, to those people that are in suffering or going without? Now, while he diddle-daddles around with 2 or 3 investigations, we'd see what's gone wrong in this affair. Will he not at least show that amount of compassion? This is Christmas, after all.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, the honourable member make know that the government made available money to principal investors who required it previously. Might also confirm once again, Mr. Speaker, that the government is providing assistance in millions and millions and millions of dollars to those investors. Not just.
Member for Vermilion Viking. Vermilion Viking.
Supplemental to the Premier. With the recovery we see in the province of Alberta on a positive trend, and the fact that many Albertans who invested in ownership in real estate, farms, and their own homes, who have lost a great deal of equity over the last few years. Could the Premier indicate when he sees the recovery so that their equity will be increasing in the losses that they have taken in the last 5 years?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it is true that when you choose not to spend your money and invest it, you either lend it or buy ownership. Now, when you lend it and the company isn't able to pay you back, you've been badly hurt, and I sympathize with that. But it's the company who has done something to you, not the government. Those people who bought equity and have lost, and many farmers and ranchers and oil industry people have lost 100% and have not expected the government to provide them with money. And so while we were doing everything possible to help the investors, and I might say, Mr. Speaker, it's already been proven that the government's way of moving to allow time for the investors has, by the very word of the receiver, provided them to obtain a greater return than would have been by following the recommendations of the quick bankruptcy and public inquiry.
Chair recognizes Edmonton Meadowlark, and if there is time, Edmonton Glengarry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One important issue, of course, in the principal group affair is whether any of the inquiries that have been structured to this point can possibly result in investors being compensated for their losses. Yesterday, and I want to repeat it, the Premier indicated that if government negligence is determined, then the government will pay. To the Premier, will the province pay all or only part of the investors' losses over what they will retrieve from the dissolution of principal's assets?
Question's clearly out of order. Since the main question is out of order, it puts in danger the whole matter of the next process. But we will entertain the next supplementary. If this one's out of order, then the whole series of questions will fail.
Mr. Speaker, that would be the first time you've ruled an entire set of questions out of order, and I think that these questions at least should be...
Challenge of the chair, honourable member. It's warning to the member to be careful in the crafting of the phrases. Now, please, the supplementary.
I'm seeking clarification of government policy on the determination of negligence. First supplementary, second question. Will the code inquiry or the ombudsman have to state explicitly that the government was negligent before the government will accept that it was negligent?
It's completely hypothetical, Mr. Speaker.
It's hardly hypothetical. If you've already determined to pay it, if it happens, it's not hypothetical. You have a policy. Do, therefore, these inquiries have the authority to state that explicitly, or does this mean that it will be the government's discretionary decision to determine its own negligence based on how it assesses any facts that come out of the inquiries?
This one is out of order because it's inquiring as to a legal opinion of the document. Final supplementary.
Finally, in light of this discussion of negligence, does the Premier not consider that the way his government frittered away $125 million...
hesitates. Order, please. Order! There's a difficulty about the use of the word which the honourable member used, because there is no proof of any negligence, and therefore an examination of the blues will mean that you'll have to be a bit more careful in phrasing the question. Let's carry on with this final supplementary.
Thank you. Does the Premier not consider that if his government's action on June the 30th resulted in the frittering away of maybe $125 million of value in mutual funds and value in the trust company and value elsewhere in that firm, which could have been retrieved on public markets and taken to support the losses in First and Associated, if that is determined to be the case, will the government accept that that was negligent, not the way in which they put those companies down?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member, I would try to answer, but he is dealing in hypothetical cases. Now, the government doesn't like to throw aspersions along around as much as some of the honourable members do. But it surely will be thought about the negligence of those who worked there.
Supplementary question, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday in Hansard, the Premier indicated clearly that the investigations by the Ombudsman and Mr. Code will give indications of the government's regulatory process. My question, in view of the fact that the Premier said that, how can the Code inquiry determine negligence on the part of the government when that is not even part of their mandate?
We're back. Forgive me, Honourable Premier. First, we have to have the consent of the House. Time for question period has expired. We have unanimous consent to finish this line of questions. Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, as I said yesterday, I believe that there are now in place 2 investigations that are going to do the full job in bringing out all the details of the entire principal affair. And then we are going to have in front of all the people of Alberta every single thing about it.
I'm hearing some strange words in my left ear. The point of order during question period, Premier. There's no other point of order declared at this stage, Honourable Member for Strathcona, but the Chair recognizes the Premier on a point of order during discussion with the question from Westlock Sturgeon.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, was the honourable member raising the point that somehow the Premier had goosed the investors when I think it was so deliberately incorrect, and I wanted an opportunity to ask him to deal with his questions in a more appropriate way in this House, although he may not want to, and make it clear that people understand that the government feels a great deal of sympathy for the investors and is doing everything possible to help them.
Honourable Member for Strathcona, on this particular point of order?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Then I will recognize you immediately after. The Chair recognizes Westlock Sturgeon.
Am I allowed to speak on the point of order, Mr. Speaker? I don't think there's any question in the vernacular of the term that the Premier was talking about the English language a while back, that there's no question, Mr. Speaker, that these investors have been goosed. The whole idea is that we're trying to determine by who, and he says holding 2 investigations. One of them's in secret. So there's no question. They've suffered. They've lost. Now, I don't know what he uses for the word goose, but that's what I consider goose. When you lose your money on a government licensed adventure.
Please, Honourable Member, does the Chair understand that the member wishes to withdraw his statement? If not, perhaps then the Chair will make another ruling in a moment.
Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to withdraw it. It was only point of order to try to explain to him in simple English, barrack room English or locker room English, what he has done to the investors in this province.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The matter will be a call for a review of the blues, and perhaps the members will be able to deal with it on another occasion. Chair recognizes now Edmonton Strathcona. A point of order.
Mr. Speaker, on the point of order raised earlier by the Leader of the Opposition and explained by you, Mr. Speaker, on the basis of 23G1, as I heard it, which is the sub judice matter. Mr. Speaker, I realize that on the ruling that you made yesterday, the matter, if you say it is to do with the code inquiry impinging on that matter, is one which falls within the ambit of the rule. But I just wish to draw respectfully to your attention, Mr. Speaker, that one must then go on and see, having decided that it falls within the ambit of the rule, who is prejudiced, whether any person may be prejudiced. The question that you made the ruling on, Mr. Speaker, concerned the question of what would constitute negligence. And it's difficult indeed, Mr. Speaker, I submit, to find anybody that would be prejudiced by that, other than the government itself, possibly, but it's the government speaking.
Please, Honourable Member. A due and appropriate review of the blues will take place in due course. Nevertheless, it was a ruling of the chair. What the member is currently doing is actually appealing the Speaker's ruling. And there is an appropriate manner in which to do this, and I look forward to a substantive motion if that is what the member for Strathcona wishes to do. The chair would also parenthetically like to point out that it's usual for the member who is directly aggrieved to raise the point of order himself rather than. It is the usual procedure. It is not clad in iron. Just point it out.
A point of order.
Sorry. Is this a new point of order? There's no further discussion on this particular point of order. Order, please. Order. Pardon me, Leader of the Opposition. Thank you very much. Orders of the day. I'm sorry.
Order.
What is this particular point of order?
This concerns the grounds under which 3 of my 4 questions were ruled out of order, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I'm getting that impression, actually. I believe that there were 2 possibilities for in the discussion which ensued the various
Order, please, honourable member. We're in the same difficulty as with respect to Edmonton Strathcona's challenge of the chair. Perhaps we could meet privately at the conclusion of the day. The same offers apply to all members of the House, including the member for Edmonton Strathcona, as well as the Leader of the Opposition. Orders of the day have been called. The chair has recognized Edmonton Meadowlark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the first time in my experience that we haven't been able to make our case on a point of order following question period. I respect the fact that you would like to meet with me personally. I would be pleased to do that, but to discuss your ruling, but I believe that I should be able to make the case about that ruling now, and I would appreciate the opportunity to do that. It is critical that this kind of discussion be in public and in the open so that we can, as much as possible, create an environment within which we can discuss this important issue. I would like to make the case, therefore, at this time. Thank you. It seems to me that there are...
Has not been recognized to carry on. A motion for an appeal to the chair. Calgary Buffalo on a point of order, followed by Edmonton Strathcona.
It's on the general difficulty which we are encountering in this matter, Mr. Speaker, and with respect to the need to develop a process to handle this issue more effectively. The concern that I have is that we in the opposition are placed in a position of Russian roulette, and that if we raise an issue that is in any way related to this particular problem, we run the risk of being called out of order and losing our question. Now, I understand that that has been the practice of this House, but we are here dealing with a very unusually difficult